We are live. Hello, everyone. Hello, hello, hello. This is Design Unfiltered. What is this? This is eight,
I
seven?
believe eight.
Oh my gosh. This is like a thing, you guys. This is officially a thing.
Consistency.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll let people kind of come in and get settled. And I'll introduce Arielle again, but for people that are here right at the outset, we're really, really excited that Arielle Julie is with us today. She's an awesome recruiter, just connector, just fabulous woman on so many fronts. She's currently at Zillow. She's been at Pinterest, Slack, Uber. She's just full of great advice. She just told us that she did, before she got her current job, she was doing tons of mentoring on ADP lists. So she's just really somebody who always gives back to the community and really, really cares about designers and just people. So we're so excited to have you, Arielle.
I love this intro. This is the best intro.
Play it again.
Yeah, just bask in it. We'll do it again.
I'm going to record it and have it on my phone when I show up places. I'm just going to play
it. Your voicemail.
Yeah, that'll be your ringtone. You'll be like, oh,
intro music.
Yeah, exactly. So as people come in, and of course, Jared Tredly and Erica Fortgang, amazing design recruiters themselves, and me.
And Joanne Weaver.
So as everybody gets settled in, if you guys just want to, so our viewers, if you want to post where you're calling in from or tuning in from, we always love
I can start there. So I am currently in Sacramento, California. But I started my recruiting career in New York City on the agency side. So I started at Aquint and then Vitamin T. I have been a lot of places. So hopefully you're not afraid of how many places I've been. I'm okay with it. Some people are not, but I've been a lot of places. I was at 24/7 for a hot minute, but really it was Aquint and Vitamin T. And that's where I got my foundation in recruiting.
Yeah. You were in the trenches with us.
I was. And then I crossed over to the dark side in 2012.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah. Nice. Yeah, we get a lot of people calling in from all sorts of places. I think we've had Europe, Asia.
Greece I remember that stood out.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, how cool.
Yeah.
Very helpful.
Cool. Yeah.
And when we did the podcast with Lena, was she calling in from Europe?
She was there at the time. It was a bit later in the evening for her. Yep. Yes. That was super fun, that one as well. That's why I'm so excited to have you back.
Yay.
Boston.
You're having a little pre-chat before we went live, and we had so many ideas. We were bouncing around amongst the four of us, and I know this is going to be an amazing session. Session.
As always, if you do have really specific questions that you want some answers to or discussion on, drop them as a comment. We see them coming through, and then I'll try to pick them out and put them on the screen and highlight them. And it really we can talk plenty, but we would love to use that energy to talk about the things that everyone wants to hear about as well. So if there is anything really specific that you think we can comment and discuss on, drop it as a comment so that we'll see it and then we can dive into it. I see a fellow Hudson Valley.
Hey,
Well, there you go. Sergey, yes.
Nice. We're neighbors.
Yes, very cool.
I think maybe Sacramento. I can't tell if this comment means that this person lives in Sacramento or they're happy that I live in Sacramento. I can't tell.
I'm not sure what that. Pretty cool on both fronts. I'll take either.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's great. Nice. Brian is there too. Hey, Brian. Also California, San Diego, I believe Brian's in.
Oh, cool.
Also West Coast. So there you go.
Right
I love that. Right on. How Californian.
Right on.
Even though that's not California. Is that Texas? Where is he from?
Oh, Matthew McConaughey?
Yeah.
That was my best Matthew McConaughey impression. Good, right? Should I quit my recruiter job?
Yeah, definitely.
I think he's from Austin, isn't he? I think that that movie was set in Austin, but yeah. Yep.
LA, there you go. Should we maybe while we are getting spun up and getting going, I would love to just dive in and start chatting about things. But maybe Arielle, you could discuss a little of your current kind of role in Zillow. And you've
Oh
been in
yeah.
this talent space for many years and often worked with creatives and designers. But I know there's so much more to what you do, and I think what you're doing now as well at Zillow. So maybe you can bring us up to speed a little bit on the current work you're doing.
Yes, awesome. And I love the comment from Mike. I think a lot of people at Zillow are very happy.
Excellent.
Zillow is a great company. I am not here to like pitch you on Zillow or rep Zillow, but what I'll say is that I'm in a role now where I oversee talent brand, which is employer branding. So I'm taking my recruiter hat, and now I get to use that lens to say what's attractive to people, what would attract people to Zillow, like what specifically about our culture or our benefits or our setup is attractive enough to make people either come to these recruiting events or apply. We are also hiring in Mexico City, which is super exciting. So I got a chance to go down to Mexico City a month ago.
Beautiful.
And we threw this giant recruiting event. So it's a lot of fun. Now, my job is a lot of work. I am very tired, but it's a lot of fun.
I love that.
I love schmoozing. I love meeting people. I love throwing events. And we get to do a lot of that. And then in addition to that, there's newsletters, the career site, social media campaigns. And to clarify, it's the employer brand side of Zillow, not the corporate side. So if you're in LinkedIn, you probably see Zillow posting things that feel very like real estate driven, like to that kind of consumer base. My consumer base is who would work at Zillow, which is basically every role you can think of, but it's a different message.
Yeah. Would there be, just following off that, like, would there be something that you're super excited about recently that maybe has been an introduction of a new benefit or a perk or something about Zillow that it just shows that they're actively looking to attract great people by having these things in place? Anything that jumps out?
So later today, we're going to meet with a production company in LA, and we're going to kick off kind of like a commercial series where there will be like 3 or 4 individual commercials and then one that culminates everything together. And it's all about our cloud HQ. So Zillow is very, we don't like to say the word remote, but we are distributed because we do come together at least once a quarter. But these videos will show you like what it's like in a distributed workforce. And so we're going to work on that and make these very cool videos soon. And so we're doing like all of our storyboarding later today. I'm super excited about that.
That is really fun. Zillow has always had a design page. I remember, I don't know what the status is of it right this second, but I would often reference that page to many other companies. The way that Zillow would showcase its product designers and the design group in its own standalone page site, like that to me is, you want a company that's trying to outwardly show that they believe in design culture. That's a pretty good starting point.
Yeah, so I'm not tied to the product design org anymore, but Jenny Arden, formerly of Nike, she heads up our product design org, and it's great. It's really great. So I am still able to connect anybody who's interested to the recruiters, but I don't sit in that seat anymore where I'm like actually working on those roles.
Got it. But you're coming with this wealth of experience in talent acquisition. So like all these questions that people are coming with, like you are the, the expert.
Absolutely. And like you just mentioned, I was still in ADP list as of like 2 months ago, on the front lines, in the trenches, talking to lots of designers and giving them advice on how they should restructure their portfolio, how important the resume is, how they should go about networking. So I still try to stay really close to it because it's super fulfilling for me. I have to say, like a recruiter role, I know all 3 of you feel this. It's very transactional, but you see the impact that you have immediately. It's like obvious impact, and it can be really large for an individual or for a company. And so I do love that. And I want to stay close to that regardless of like what my official title is. I love being in the trenches for sure.
Well, you were just telling us too about you were doing a workshop with LinkedIn, I think it was, and you said you had some really good learnings from that. It's just in terms of like maybe just to give context to our whole conversation, like what does the hiring state of the market look like right now, and what does it look like for the next year? Because you had some great stuff that you learned.
Yeah. So in February, I went to a conference thrown by a recruitment marketing firm. And in May, I went to a conference at LinkedIn. And at both, I got a ton of insight into what the labor market looks like. And normally, like we might think, oh, labor market statistics might not be exciting, but there's a lot of things going on in the labor market that I think are pretty interesting. So if you are a job seeker and you're sitting at home and you're applying to roles and you don't really know what's happening around you, I have some insight there. So first, there are a lot of jobs, even if it doesn't feel like it. There are 20% more jobs posted right now than pre-COVID. So there's a lot of jobs available.
Okay.
Now, there's also a ton of people looking for work. And that comes from people who are coming over to this country looking for work, people who are returning to the workforce, because remember, a ton of people left the workforce in COVID. And so those people are returning. And then you have people graduating. So there's a lot of people competing for jobs right now. And that's basically the first thing I say in all my ADP list calls is that there's a ton of people applying for roles. When you see a product design role and you apply, 1,000 more people may apply to that role. And then the company may turn that posting off because they can't physically get through 1,000 applications. And then to go through those applications, they will use keywords. So it's really important that your resume and your portfolio has all the relevant keywords from the job description in it, because that's what the recruiters are going to use to filter down that list of 1,000 to maybe 300. And maybe they physically touch 300 of those applications, but they likely won't touch 1,000. So it is important that you are coming across as relevant for the role so that you can make it into the pile that's being reviewed. So that's happening. And then in terms of people looking for jobs from the LinkedIn conference, of the people who are active on LinkedIn, like let's say 80%, 80, most of those people, 80% of them are looking to switch jobs. So as long as our economy continues to have jobs available, there's going to be a great reshuffling again towards the end of the year. And so that is also something to think about when you think about your competition and sending your resume to an ATS and what happens to it. There's just a lot of people doing the same thing. And so you have to make sure that you are highlighting all the relevant skills in that resume, all the keywords match with the job description. And then that you're also doing other things to get your resume seen. You're cold reaching out to people. You're trying to make connections. You're following those leads. You're following up on the connections. You're figuring out who else you can talk to. All these things are important because they'll increase your chances of actually getting an interview or getting to the next step. Versus when I was job hunting, I would have a spreadsheet of all the places I applied. And of course, there's like 30, 40 places you apply and you want to keep track of everything. But that's not enough. You also need to look at who's at those companies, see if you can touch someone, get a hold of someone on LinkedIn, get to that next step, because if that person's not the right person, then asking, is there a better person that I can talk to about this role? And one of the points I want to make is cold reaching out is very overwhelming for most people. Like unless you're in a sales role, you don't love cold reaching out. But the key to it is to keep it super, super short if you want someone to read it and you want them to action on it. So if I get a message from someone and it's, hey, you're at Zillow, that seems like a great place to be. I'm interested in this product design role. That's it. Do you know who I should talk to? Maybe that's one extra sentence. I'm likely to digest that pretty quickly and forward that person along or respond and introduce them to someone. But when I get the message that's like multiple paragraphs, it has a resume attached, it's your life story, it's why you're super excited, I'm not even going to finish reading that message. And I would like to action on it, but I probably won't, because then I'm distracted by something else that comes in that's much quicker that I can action on.
That's a great reminder. Just, I think for everyone, like I tend to be very loquacious in my emails, like to clients, like my write-ups are really long. So I'm always trying to shorten it because I know that I too also respond to things that are just like little bite-sized pieces, but like really effective, like and efficient, right? Like if there's somebody that they're coming referred to me by somebody, like drop the name.
Name
like,
drop, yes. Name drop in the first line. The first line should be, Arielle Julie told me to reach out to you. Do that right away and then say that you're interested in the role at Zillow so that you can hook them. And depending on the power dynamic, okay? So like if your referral is someone important, drop their name. That's the first word in the message. Mike Jones told me to reach out to you so that that person can take note of that and make sure to action on it, because that's an important person for them to follow up with. So I see the note here about Your profile summary should not just be a list of your skills. That's advice I give people too. I definitely don't think when someone says, tell me about yourself, that you should recite your resume. They already have your resume. You should say something that is a little bit more insightful, dynamic, and memorable. Ooh, I'm going to go on a small tangent, but when I'm on ADP list, I'm always looking through people's profile to find what's unique about them and what's memorable. And then I'm coaching them to lead with that. For example, there's a guy who I'll never forget, and he's a really great pianist. And so we rebranded him as the piano playing product designer. And I'm like, that's what you're going to lead with every single time you talk about yourself, because people will remember that. And if they're interviewing 5 people, they're going to remember the pianist of the group for sure, even if you're not the best candidate. So insightful, unique, something memorable.
I love that.
That way you can stand out in that pile of 1,000 applicants.
I went to a sales seminar and they were saying this woman was branding herself as like, I write everything. I'm a copywriter. I do long form, short form, headlines, But then she wasn't getting any interviews. And then as soon as she was like, I'm a healthcare writer that writes about diabetes. Whoa, like through the roof, right? Because then like people could actually, they could latch onto it. It actually means something. And there might not be as many opportunities out there, but the ones that are specifically for her, she's going to be like a slam dunk match.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of people who may be newer and earlier in their career think that we should use a lot of words and we should use corporate words. But I think the simpler the word, the shorter the word, the more impactful. Because often I will read someone's summary and I'll say, but you didn't say anything. Like you didn't tell me anything about yourself. What did you say? There's a lot of words here. And so I feel like I'm always coaching people to just keep it really simple and unique.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, and especially in your reach outs. I'll tell you someone who just reached out to me the other day and I got back to him because I laughed out loud. So we posted a role. It's not my role, but his message was, you are brave in LinkedIn. And it was like, whoa, posting a product design role right now, that's brave. You're going to get a lot of responses. And I didn't even post it, but I laughed so hard and I passed him along to the team. And I think he did get to talk to a recruiter based on that. So something unique will go a long way.
Definitely.
It's personable, bit of personality. And just if it gets you in the room, then you get your shot, right? It doesn't guarantee you the job, but at least gets you in the room to at least begin things and to really tell them a bit more of the story, which is, step one and super important.
I just had someone send me a picture of their dog and it says like, Daisy wants to know why you're not getting back to us. And I thought that was really funny. Now, there's a risk that the file is way too large to make it through a spam filter, but it was really funny. And I did respond to it.
Well, like there's an element of playfulness. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Erica.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, sounds like you would enjoy seeing those, some people send gifts out to, or GIFs, however people say it, in their emails, kind of like, why haven't you responded?
Yeah. But I think it shows like confidence too. They're kind of like swinging for the fences. Like they're taking a shot, right? Like they're doing something. It's like a little edgy. It's not super done by a lot of people. It's really like, but it's letting their personality out and it's creating a point of connection where it's like, oh, that's a little shocking, or like, oh, that's surprising, because we get the same emails every day, day in and day out. So it's like, if you can bring delight to us and like kind of make us sit up and like our ears prick up, then you've done a good job,
I agree.
I love that.
I think that you should also not give people homework. So the advice when you're reaching out is don't ask them to review anything for you or give you feedback. You want to connect. You want to ask them if they can connect. I always advise you to ask for 15 minutes because no one will ever talk to you for just 15 minutes. It'll always be 30 minutes, but ask for 15, low-hanging fruit, non-committal. And then when you get them on the call, just have them talk about themselves. So now we're like gamifying it a little bit because everybody can talk about themselves. So ask them what their journey was into the role, how they got into Zillow, how they made the transition from industrial design to product design. And then you can start to ask questions on, what advice do you have for me? Or is there anybody else I should talk to? And always, if you get someone from LinkedIn and you can see that they have a lot of connections or followers, ask them if they're open to you going through their connections. So a success story I have is there's a candidate that I met on ADP list, and we spoke a few times, and he was just very, very action oriented. And so I offered to open up my connections on LinkedIn, and I have maybe 8,000. Let's say I know 5,000 of them, but I have a lot. And I said, if you find someone you want to be introduced to and I know them, I'll introduce you. And he came at me with a list of like 30 people. And I was like, well, I can't make 30 introductions. Let's stack rank this.
Yeah.
And so I made
down.
10 introductions for him. And he got a job from one of them. And I stack ranked them where I said, actually, these people I know personally. I'm on a text message relationship with them. And he got a job. And then he told his friend, here's what's really funny. He told his friend attempted to do the same thing, but his friend was a little bit lazier. So he didn't do a lot of work. He just kept coming back to me, asking me to help. And I was like, I'm tapped out. I've given you all my resources. But the friend also got a job. Just it took him a little bit longer because he wasn't as proactive. So I think that following up on leads and seeing them through will go a really, really long way.
There is definitely some work involved right now, isn't there, to find a job? Exactly as you said too earlier of just applying to things isn't enough. There's all these other things to do. It's even the networking, the going through connections, and then following up. It's energy, time, it's effort. Can be challenging, but the juice is worth the squeeze. I think the results are there, right? It's you kind of need to go for it. Not everyone has the same challenge. Some people are very fortunate to either have more connects or, people they have already worked with, or maybe a portfolio that does get them in the room very quickly. But for anyone else, it doesn't mean that you can't get a role, but it may take a bit of that extra effort. And oftentimes I do see those people get rewarded. They push a little bit harder. They go a little bit further. They get in the room. They've researched more ahead of an interview. They've polished their presentation more. They've practiced and rehearsed, whatever it is. All those little incremental extra pieces of effort ultimately get them, the result in the longer run. And you kind of see it time and time again. Oh yeah, you worked for this, and then you got it. It's not.
And it feels good when you work for it and you get it, right? I mean, it also feels good to get a job very easily. I won't say that it doesn't, but it feels really good when you know that you deserved it and that you were meant to be in that seat.
Right. And also just like send signals to us too. Like if I get somebody who proactively reaches out to me, like, okay, I'm assuming this person's in it to win it. They're looking for a job, like, let's go. But then they send me a portfolio that says like work in progress. Right. Or like, oh, I haven't updated my resume. It's like, well, are you really in it to win it?
I know.
I want to see this like fleshed out. I want to know that you have put in the work and that you do care. Because if I'm going to be attaching myself to you, like I'm going to be working hard on your behalf. Like we all work hard on our people's behalves. So we want to make sure that we know that person's going to be willing and able to put in the effort. And so what they're sending us is a good indication of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And right now, because they have so much competition, the lazy effort isn't going to cut it. There's just more people who are putting 110% in at the exact same time. Yeah.
One real quick point on that I notice too sometimes is that, I'm really eager, I'm really keen, I'm looking. And then, maybe you're like, oh, great. Well, this company is interested. They want to have a chat to you. When are you free? Oh, I don't really have a lot of availability. Maybe in a week or two's time, I've got an hour on, in 2 weeks time, you're like, what?
Cognitive dissonance.
How are we, so it's like those little indirect signals help, people that are, okay, put me in the ring. I'm ready to go. Like I've got time this day. I've got blocks on this day. I've got a block on that day. Like when would they like to meet? I could meet tomorrow. Like I'm ready to go. And that helps. And when it's not that, obviously some circumstances aside, I'm away, I'm, whatever, I'm getting some surgery, no problem. But when it doesn't, you don't know that there's any reason and you just don't have the time to meet with someone for an interview. Well, guess what? Someone else is available.
I know. There's someone else who's hungrier and they will make the time. Yeah.
That is that challenge right now.
So so a LinkedIn user, there's so many anonymous LinkedIn users. Is that like
I've noticed that.
Oh, what that is.
everybody's so shy today. Everybody's so shy. And by the way, please, as we're talking, like, don't be shy. Like, please put in questions for us, for Arielle. You've got this like brain trust here that's just ready, willing, and able to share answers to your questions. So please, send us your questions. One of the questions I'm seeing on here is something that we at Design Unfiltered have received a lot of requests about, is around using AI for hiring and having bots. So we've all done coaching, and I think there's a lot of existential angst from people around like, is my career being handled by this like weird AI god behind the scenes? And like, what do I need to do to make sure I get past the bot? Maybe you could speak a little bit about like, how does that actually work internally at the companies that you've worked at? And what do people need to keep in mind when they are formatting a resume or applying certain ways?
Yeah, so my personal take, and I'm saying personal because at Zillow, they are very pro AI technology. So we use it in a lot of different ways. But personally, I think we all have to remember that there aren't any checks and balances for AI yet. So you cannot just create something and send it out. You have to comb through it and maybe pull some stuff out, personalize it, tweak it, but you cannot just rely on AI to put together a message for you that you shoot out and you haven't given it a once over or tweaked it a little bit. It's just I personally think that you're doing yourself a disservice by kind of going that route. But what I'll say is the way that AI is used from the recruiter side in-house is that it's used a lot in the ATS platforms to stack rank candidates. So instead of so it's more like that 1,000 application pile that I'm talking about. When we whittle it down to 300, then we stack rank that 300, and the bots or AI is basically saying this candidate is the most relevant to what you're looking for, and it's only going off of the resume and the portfolio, maybe their LinkedIn if you've included a LinkedIn link. So that means it's up to you to make sure you're conveying how relevant you are for these roles. So I don't want to say you need a different resume for every job, because ideally you're looking for the same set of jobs and it's not a brand new skill set. But if you don't have it clearly labeled or called out, or the keywords that match what the job is looking for, you're definitely going to get overlooked. And you're not going to make it into that stack ranking. And I know people want to gamify this. I don't think gamifying it will help you in the long run, but let's say you want to figure out how to gamify it in the short run. It's all about the keywords, padding those keywords. For example, if you have been a product designer for 5 years, but you've only had a product design title for 1 year, you're going to fall down in that ranking. You're not going to come across as strong as someone who's had 3 product design titles at different companies, even though you both have the same amount of experience. So that's like a way to look at it in terms of gamifying it, like how much weight the title and the experience holds, and making sure you convey that. Now, if you haven't been a product designer for all 5 years, that's going to come across when you interview. You can't fake that. But if you were trying to fake it, it would be changing that graphic designer title to maybe say visual designer, or changing that UX designer title to say product designer. It might get your foot in the door, but you still have to back it up when you interview and when you show your work, right? So I just think AI helps with convenience. I'm not one of those people that thinks it's going to take away jobs from physical people. It's going to make physical people's jobs much easier. But if they don't check it and look at it, it's just going to make you come across as a little bit sloppier, generic, uninformed, because you're not actually doing anything with what the AI delivered to you. Like, they gave you this template. So now go into the template and put yourself into it, personalize it, make it make sense. That was my AI soapbox. And I have so many thoughts on AI images. Jesus Christ. Like, that's a whole other thing, especially as a Black woman. AI has not figured out braids yet. If you see an image of a Black person and it's an AI image, look at the bottom of the braid. It's like they just give up. Like they get all the way down and then it's just done. Or like the fingertips are just
Fingers,
off,
I know. So
or the eyes are kind of like crooked. Like that's its own thing. And we do use AI in our images as well. So I can say that because I have designers on my team who are bringing me images and I'm like, no.
That's not gonna work.
It's got a ways to go. It's got a ways to go. Yeah.
But it's a good starting point, right?
Mm-hmm.
I guess so. That's my take on AI and hiring. Now, if you are using AI to craft messages to people, don't forget that if other people are using AI to craft messages to people, you could very well be sending a very identical message to someone too. So you do need to also change it up a little bit, personalize it for that person or coming from yourself.
Yeah, and I think AI is just kind of a terrible writer usually. Like it's like I hear the word wooden when they describe AI writing, and I'm like, that's a perfect word for it. There's no like oomph, there's no personality. And I think something that's really become clear in this conversation, just that we've had so far, is that like personality and oomph really means everything.
It's what sets you apart. Absolutely. Right.
I think AI can be used to like, I use it for like shortening my emails or like, oh, maybe I need to summarize it in a way where it's just easier to let a bot do that. But I think like the juice of the message and the crux of the message, I think needs to come from the person for sure. You said something interesting about, having titles be a certain number of years, like you have to have a certain number of years of experience. I just coached somebody recently who had done UX UI design as part of his technologist jobs, but he had a technologist title. So on his resume, he would say technologist / UX UI designer. But then on his LinkedIn, it only has the technologist title because he's like, oh, I don't want these companies to come back and be like, why did you put this title on there? That wasn't your title. What would you suggest for something like that?
Yeah, so my advice comes from being a recruiter. Like if you're not on the inside, you won't have this insight, but choosing titles that are so specific to the company always hurts you. Technologist is both a broad title, but it's also still very niche and not a lot of people use it or know what it is. So I think saying technologist over designer could and not hinder, but like you might get overlooked versus spelling out that you are a designer developer or that you can code, you're a designer who can code, calling yourself a technologist, just everyone isn't using that term yet. I don't know that everyone will use that term. He has the slash, right?
Well, here's the thing. So he officially had the title. I think it was like web developer or something specific like that. But he was doing UX UI at the same time. That just UX UI wasn't part of his title. So to take your suggestion, he wanted to make sure that people knew that he had multiple years of UX UI experience, even though that wasn't his title. But it might look kind of sketchy if he puts UX UI designer as part of his title on LinkedIn. That employer might come back.
Ultimately, he is a UX UI designer, right? It's just the company labeled that as a technologist. I guess that's where I'm thinking the technologist comes from.
Well, he did both jobs. He was a web developer and UX UI at the same time.
Was he still at that company?
No, these are past companies.
I don't know. I'm kind of into tell me kind of what you do, I think, as your title. And then you can maybe describe further down in the description, kind of like the split. But I would agree with Arielle. I think it's important to have everything stacked. Like that's what you do.
Sometimes as you start to get very niche like that too, that may not be appealing to as broad a range of companies, but it also makes you pretty stand out for the ones that do utilize that niche skill set. So I know there's tweaking to appeal to the masses at times, but sometimes my thought process on things like that is like, okay, stay niche, but find your tribe of the other niche utilizers, the other places that can utilize more of that. But again, maybe this particular person's preference is to only be a designer now. They don't want to get overlooked for that and be discounted because they had a dual role in the past. So it's
also
tricky.
The summary is a great place for all of your niche desires and wants, right? Like your title can be very, very traditional and basic, but then you can really like paint a lot of you can paint with more color and you can like tell a more vivid picture in that summary. Same on the resume, right? But I think people should be really, really basic and traditional with their titles. I don't think they should play around with titles, because I do think that's what pushes you further down in the stack ranking.
Yeah. Would there be a couple of tips? And this is a little bit, I see Alana's question there as well, asking about standing out in the portfolio. But elaborating on that a little bit is maybe, say, in these places you've worked, you've taken from 1,000 down to 300, and then your team is running eyeballs over those and likely going into portfolios and stuff. What might they be looking then? Because you can't interview 300 people. You want to probably get that down to, say, what? 100, maybe 50 even, probably even less.
I would say a hiring manager probably doesn't want to talk to more than 25 people. Right? And that's over months. But I would say after we whittle it down, then we want to look at direct industry fit. So for example, I can talk about Pinterest because I'm not there anymore, but like at Pinterest, the keywords I may have used would be looking for a senior product designer, and that person is going to work on activation, which means getting people to convert from free to paid, even though that doesn't technically exist at Pinterest, but let's use that example. I would say product designer, like I want to see that title, not just product design. I want to see designer. I want to see UI designer. I may want to see user experience spelled out. I want to see interaction spelled out. I would then start going into the community. Like I want to see activation maybe, or social. I might want to see search and discovery, because these are all things you can do in Pinterest. So I would encourage people to think about the product that they're applying to. And now I'm going back on my advice of you don't need 1 million resumes, but let's say you're applying at Pinterest, you should think about the industry and the space that Pinterest lives in, and make sure that you are communicating that you've had experience with reporting or measurement tools or e-commerce or all of the things that Pinterest does. Video, photos, like those are things you want to get across. That'll help with the stack ranking, but it'll also help people see that you can be a direct fit.
The relevance.
I'm going to go on one more tangent about niches. In the product design world, it's assumed that everybody wants to be consumer facing. Everybody wants to be on the consumer side. But if you enjoy the reporting, the measurement, the enterprise, the monetization side, please play that up, because so many people don't enjoy it. So they do it, they get their foot in the door, and then they switch over to consumer. But if you enjoy that, that's a huge strength. I have a friend right now that I'm coaching through doing that. That's her background: enterprise, reporting, monetization. And I'm like, lead with that, because on the client side, they always want to hire someone who's good at it, who wants to stick with it, who's not looking to just come in, do it for however long and leave. They want someone who knows it, who's good at it, and who likes it. So those niche things that may not be sexy, telecom, enterprise, again, dashboards, internal tools, lead with that stuff, because companies want someone who's excited about that.
I had a conversation with one of the heads of talent at Anderson Horowitz, and this was some years ago, but all he wanted to know was, do we rep B2B and enterprise designers? That's all they wanted to know. So I think it's really big in the VC world, the startup world. I've also heard anecdotally that in a down market like what we're in now, that B2B enterprise internal tools tends to be really strong, because it's not as changeable by the market, right? The market is so fickle and so weird and up and down, but enterprise software is kind of that stalwart thing that's always going to be needed no matter what.
Absolutely. Like if you are comfortable in a SaaS world, that's a little bit of, I'm not going to say stability. Nothing is 100% stable, but those companies kind of always are doing well. Right. So I think that's important. And then another thing that I pointed out to my friend is, as a designer, if you can show that you know how to design in alignment with revenue, like things that generate revenue, things that measure revenue, that report on revenue, either to your clients or to the company, highlight that, because everyone wants to know that you can be data driven and you can design with data in mind. And that is where a lot of designers fall off. If they don't convey it, or they don't have that experience, that's often how they get passed over for these client side roles. Is we hiring managers want people who we know can help with revenue. Like everybody should be helping at some point in the company, like in some way generate revenue, right? whether it's just
Mhm.
reporting it, but like being able to get that across is really, really attractive.
Yes,
Yeah.
I actually had another coaching situation where they said if we're going to submit candidates to a company where maybe they don't have an open role, but we're just like, hey, do you want to see this person? We don't send their name, of course, but hey, do you want to see this person? And then in the bullet points to talk about how much they saved the company money
Yeah.
or how
Mhm.
much they earned the company money. Because it's really kind of
Mm.
like it comes down to brass tacks. Like, what have you done for me lately? Like,
And it's
money
hard
made
to
is money.
quantify. I'll say
Yeah.
that it's hard to quantify if you're hearing this and you're like, I don't know how to find that out.
Right.
Go talk to your product
Yes.
manager.
Mm,
Go talk
mm.
to your partners and figure that out so you can start to have that stat about the work you're doing.
Yes.
Usually, by the way, if your team and your product gets highlighted in like an all hands meeting or it's on the company's roadmap as the focus, then you know you're tied to like the revenue generating like business stream.
Mhm.
But sometimes it's hard to figure that out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's interesting. What would you say is a quick tip? I'm seeing some good questions kind of flying in here, but to generalize them a little bit more, it's like people are asking you about the right keywords maybe to put on the resume. Would a top tip be like looking at the advertisement or the job description, for example, the job that you want to apply for, and trying to just reflect the language that maybe the job ad is using when, I guess.
100%. And then also, in addition to that, maybe go over to their site, go
Mhm.
on their careers page and see how they talk about their company culture. So that would help
Yep.
you with the soft skills side of things.
Right.
Like the technical skills is very black and white,
Mhm.
but for soft skills, it's hard to know what companies value. So I will not give names of companies, but I have
Mhm.
worked at a company that really valued people who were not afraid to fight for their ideas,
Right.
right? Like the best idea wins. I need you to have enough competence and experience to fight for the idea you're putting forward. That is not intuitive. A lot of people don't actually even want to be in an environment like that. But if you read something like that on the career page, maybe then you need to write in, had to, whatever word is better than fight, had to fight for my ideas in this
Advocate.
role. Advocate, right? Had to
Mhm.
strongly advocate with engineering and product to get this project completed. And
Mhm.
that would be a soft skill nod that someone would pick up on and say, oh, okay, this person might be a good fit for here.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm not big on needing you to know every C-level executive's name at a company, but you should know what their values are, or at least the values
Mhm.
they're putting out. You should go to Blind. Blind is a very dark place, but it is often the source of truth. So that's what I'll say. It's
Yeah.
very dark, but it
Yeah.
is often not inaccurate. It is
Yeah.
accurate. So go to Blind, see what people are saying about the company culture. Make sure you're reflecting the words they're using when they talk about themselves. If this is somewhere you want to be, and I think that helps people make more of a direct match to like you in that role.
Those are
Well,
good points.
really good.
You talked a bit about soft skills before we jumped on here as well. A lot of the time in your roles, you've been, you're that first touch point for a designer or a creative. You're looking for certain soft skills. You're not always going to go in quite so deep on maybe the technical. The designers might do that, but yeah, what sorts of soft skills do you like to look
Yeah,
for? Signals of that, or things you
yeah.
pick up on? Maybe even things people do wrong too. I know you
I
mentioned that
love
too.
answering this question. I will tell you soft skills. When you are interviewing, you always want to come across as flexible.
Mhm.
Flexible, kind of number one. And by flexible, I mean, if you're giving an example of when there was change and you were pushing against that change or you fought that change, that's a bad example. Do not give that
Mm.
example because all companies want to know that when they change and they reorg, that you're going to go with the flow. And even if you
Okay.
don't want to go with the flow, don't say that out loud. Just hold it inside and pretend that you are going to go with the flow because that's how you will lose out on that role. So
Immediately.
being flexible, so this is the same, being open to change and kind of
Mhm.
maybe even explicitly saying that you understand that change is literally the only thing that's constant and that you will just, you'll make it work, you'll adapt. So those are big. Being good to collaborate with, that's a
Okay.
soft skill. Like when you are collaborating, are you basically convincing people to get on your page the whole time, or are you actually open to a new idea and a new way of doing things? So you should have an
Mm.
example in your back pocket of how you collaborated well. And A+ points if it's an example of a really difficult collaboration where you had to compromise and then you still had a really good outcome. Those are like the best examples. Let's see, collaborating, flexibility, being adaptable, change. Receiving feedback well. Oh my God, that's the biggest one.
Yes.
You have to be able to receive feedback well. If you are early in your career, people aren't going to expect you to give feedback well, but you have to be able to take it. And I kind of think this takes time. I don't think anyone just wakes up or is born and they like receive feedback well, but you need to at least fake it, because that's who people want to hire. They want to hire someone that they can give you a critique. And yes, it needs to be a legitimate critique, but you can take it, internalize it, compartmentalize it, and then move forward and like do the right thing. A lot of design interviews will test you on this in the interview. So you will be doing an exercise or giving a critique, and someone will coach you on a different direction. And you might not pick up on it in the interview, but they're trying to see if you're going to take this feedback and change what it is you're starting to say based on the feedback, or if you're just going to ignore it and push through it. So that's one of the tricky things that happens in interviews, where people can see if you are actually good at receiving feedback or not. Are you open to coaching real time?
Yeah.
I love that. And that's true, I think, from in our jobs too. Like if I give a candidate feedback from a client where maybe they didn't get the job, and I give the feedback and, as kind of polite and effective, like, just a way that they can digest it way. If they don't react well to the feedback, that just really tells me a lot about that person, that they're not really that committed to self-inquiry. They don't want to hear anything negative about themselves. They're not willing to change. So to me, that's not the kind of person that I want to align with. Like I want to align with somebody. It's like, please give me feedback. They might not take all of it. They might not agree with all of it, but it's like, this is the way you landed on somebody. That's really good to know. And then you can make amendments in the future if you choose to.
The last thing I'll say, because it's controversial, but you got to be likable. And it sucks, especially as a woman, as a Black woman, to say you have to be likable. But real talk, if you are not likable, people won't hire you. Who wants to work with someone they don't like? So it doesn't mean that you have to tell jokes or be the life of the party or agree with everything, but you can't be grumpy or too stoic or not emote where people don't understand what it is or how it is to work with you. And that can come across in an interview. So the advice I give people, if they are maybe like an introvert or they're more pulled back, is to just say explicitly, hey, I'm really excited about this role. I tend to be a little more standoffish, just a heads up. If you need more from me, let me know. That way you've disarmed them.
I love that.
And even if you come off with like resting, face, they know that like you're aware of it. And you want to be better. But if you're not likable, you're not going to get the job. And this only doesn't apply in the engineering world, obviously. But like, if you are not likable as a designer, you're not going to get the job.
Yeah.
We've seen it. And we're seeing the impact of that even more so right now, because there are some really great designers technically that maybe aren't as likable in many environments, and this is a time that I think they're having a harder time, because the work itself just doesn't cut it as the only thing,
right, as the only thing, exactly, because other people have to work with you, right? And then the more senior you are, you're setting the example, you're leading by example, and you get to set the tone the more senior you are. So that's I say controversial because I know people will have feelings about me telling people to be likable, but it is what it is. So.
Well, and I think also too in this market, I think there's a lot of anxiety and a lot of fear. People have been out of work for coming up on a year, more than a year. So I think that there's a lot of nervousness and anxiety, like, oh my God, I finally got this interview. I really have to ace it, and that can. I think this energy of like, I've got to get the job. I've got to get them to like me. I've got to get this. I got to get that. That's it's kind of it's greedy. That's not exactly the right word, but what I'm trying to say is I think coming to a conversation with the spirit of giving. I love what you said before, Arielle, when you said, ask the person, like ask your interviewer about them. Like, how did they come to Zillow? Like, how did they transfer from this? Or maybe you see something interesting in their educational background that makes them stand out. Like people, like especially I think recruiters, like we're never asked about ourselves because they're like,
Right.
oh, you're the means to an end.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
We're
But
just
like
the
we're real people
gatekeeper.
too, right? It's like
We're
taking the
humans
time,
too.
right? So, but taking that time to make the connection, we don't have to like go on and on about it. Like we don't have to have a long conversation, but just a little hint that like, oh, you're actually bringing caring and you are curious about other people and you want to give of yourself as well as get the job. There's nothing wrong with wanting the job. But I think to bring that spirit of generosity and like, how can I elevate the situation? How can I give this person something that's going to make them feel good? I think it's
I'll
just
give another example of a woman, and I won't say what company because then things, whatever. But she was great at her job. She's a great designer. But in the interview process, consistently, she always led with what she didn't have, what she was lacking. And the hiring manager told me on multiple touch points after the first call, after the portfolio review, and to prep her for the in-person, that it comes across as like not confident enough. When she was interviewing for a senior role, and he's like, it's really important that she comes across as confident in her decisions and her abilities to lead the team and be the lead. And she's constantly leading from a place of, oh, well, I don't have this, and I know I'm lacking this. And I know it was her insecurities, but even through me coaching her, she couldn't get out of that. And she truly didn't get the job because they just didn't think she was confident enough to make good decisions. That's really what it came down to. And it sucks because the hiring manager saw it. Other people in the panel, unbiased, saw it. And then I also had to give that feedback to her, which sucks because I had coached her twice on trying to like hide that, tuck that away, not lead that way. And so that one really sucked actually, because I think my feedback was just doubling down on probably some insecurities she already had. But what I try to coach people on is don't lead from a place of what you don't have. And whenever you have to talk about what you don't have, quickly follow that up with what you're doing to gain those skills, like what you're proactively doing or reading or studying to get those skills. And it's not just enough to get the job to get the skills, but like, how are you preparing for this job that you want? That at least is a better conversation than just, I don't have any experience in-house. I did see one of the comments here about transitioning from agency to in-house.
From one.
And I think your best selling point is that you have the hunger, the volume, the urgency, the pace that in-house often doesn't have. And I am generalizing in-house, but in-house, everyone gets siloed and they're working on a certain product. And the bigger the company, sometimes you're just working on a drop down for like 6 months, right? But from an agency side, you always have at least 3 or 4 clients. You're having to move fast. You're having to iterate like while you're still kind of driving the car. And that's what you should sell, that you can handle lots of different projects. You can handle high volume. You can handle changing often. And then also on the agency side, because I used to be on the agency, you're kind of the underdog. You're only as good as the last thing you did. So you always have to be great. You can't coast. You have to be better than the last thing you did to keep the client. So if you sell that, I think bringing that energy to an in-house team will be really attractive.
Yeah. And I find the biggest block for some client side companies to hire somebody agency side is that they haven't shipped and then iterated after the shipping.
Exactly.
Some people agency side have shipped. Sometimes they do. It's not
clients.
super common.
Yeah.
But if it's like a year-long project, a
2-year-long
project, that's a great point, Jared. Like to lead with like, this is a really long project.
What the in-house team will say that this person is lacking is that they probably haven't worked directly with an engineer. They haven't worked directly with the product manager. They haven't been tied to revenue. Fair. All those things are fair, but you're able to still move faster than a lot of the designers there. So unless it's like a really, really high level role where you have to set the tone, if you're just coming in mid-level, you can be the doer and you can sell yourself as the doer for this team versus harping on, what you don't have.
Yeah. And usually agency side things have to look good.
Exactly.
Really
you've
good.
got the finesse, you've got the polish. Exactly.
They got the
all
pop.
of those things are in your corner. I think it's much easier to sell that because I also think working with engineers and product managers is an easily learned skill. I don't think you can learn to be like a super polished, great visual designer as easily as you can learn to like work with an engineer or product manager.
Word.
Agreed.
I love that.
I do wonder real quick about like I see a lot of people talking, oh, I don't have a strength in this or a strength in that. I'm transitioning from here to there. Or I think if you're in a room with a company where they're not understanding the strengths that you do have, it's potentially not the best room to be in. It's when you've got a set of strengths and you can go out there and you can put them forward, you find the right team, the right company that understands that strengths. That's the room to be in. When you're having to convince someone of these strengths that you've got and they're not maybe warranting them as highly and saying, oh, but you don't have this, you don't have that. Maybe it's just not the right place. Maybe the alignment isn't quite there. Sometimes there's a smaller delta and it can be bridged, but other times it could just be the wrong place. And as much as we say that there are many candidates out there looking and companies have that luxury, there are also a lot of companies that could value your strengths too. You just,
I agree with
go
that.
And take them to another place. Take them to a place that really gets your strength.
But I think your message, Jared, is very much like he's just not that into you. And I think that's hard to sell when people are looking for jobs.
Yeah.
So while I agree, I'll also say people just want a job.
Yeah.
And then they can be more picky about like fit and who really appreciates them or not. So I agree. But I think I've said that to people before and it's been in one ear and out the other.
Doesn't land. Doesn't land.
No, it hasn't landed, just like in the movie. It hasn't landed.
Didn't land.
And I think, the beauty of your example, Arielle, where you're coaching that person to like lead with their strengths, there feels a little bit, and I've done this before in my past career when I was young, like a little bit of fake it till you make it. Like maybe you don't actually believe that you are strong in these areas, but maybe they're your biggest strengths. I think just the action of talking about them as your strengths and that you're talking about them with confidence can actually make you feel more confident about them. Like I think you can actually change your own psychology around how you are presenting yourself. And the opposite is true too. If you're constantly presenting yourself as like, oh, I'm not so great in this, that's going to harm your confidence over time. So I'm just a big believer in language being so powerful in both directions.
Yes, manifestation.
Yes.
I agree. I think one of the other things people do to not get the job is they forget to sell themselves for the job. So the example I love using is when I worked at Pandora Radio, 50-60% of the company were musicians. There's like 3,000 people there at the time. Everybody loves music. And when people would come into interview, they would get so sucked in to the music and you only have 30-45 minutes for the interview. So you have missed your window of actually selling yourself for the role you came in for because you're vibing and you're having a great conversation with this person. That's good. But then you leave and in the debrief, they're like, well, I didn't really get a good signal on if this person can do the job. And that sucks. And so many people miss out on jobs because they didn't clearly connect the dots on being able to do the job. So when I was at Pinterest, they had a really low tolerance for long-winded people. And it was like my joke where I'm like, it's zero tolerance policy here. You have to be concise, look up the STAR method, learn the STAR method, be concise. But I think that's just good advice for everybody. Like if you have 30 minutes with someone, 2, 3, 4 minutes max on this, like, do we like each other connecting part and get into the why you're a fit for the role. And then another piece of advice I give, especially for early career, is that if you don't know how in depth to go on your example, just ask. You meet someone and they ask you for an example, say, would you like a high level answer or do you want me to get really granular? Because most people miss their window of getting hired because they didn't give the right type of answer based on what that interviewer preferred. So then we get to a debrief and there's a bunch of us and one person says, this person was so long-winded and it's because they didn't want a long granular answer. They wanted high level. And another person is like, I just don't know if they can do the job. They didn't go in depth on any answers. And it's because they wanted the granular answer. And so that's a miss. And so I tell people to just ask and then you can answer exactly how that interviewer is satisfied instead of hoping that your answer lands. Just find out if it's going to land and give the right answer.
Yeah, I agree. I had somebody, just quickly, I had somebody who has like a design thinking, product thinking background and had been getting feedback from previous interviews that they were spending too much time with product thinking in the interview. And then they had another great interview and spent time on design thinking. And then the feedback from that was, oh, but you weren't product thinking enough. And I was like, oh my God, you just have to ask up front. Like maybe I think the recruiter did not prepare this person very well, but that's why like just go into it and just like say like, hey, I can do both, but we only have 30 minutes.
Which would you prefer? Absolutely.
Let them guide you. Yeah.
I know we're almost at time, but I did see a question on here that I think could be a quick one. How do you feel about follow-ups, Arielle? Like somebody was like, hey, I don't want to ask for too much. Like, when should I follow up? How many follow-ups and how often and what should they say?
So when I was in the agency side, when I was in your position, I followed up with people every 60 days. I checked in and I would just have a calendar invite. Remember to tap so-and-so. I think that's a good window. Like if you're trying to get a first connection and you haven't heard back, then I would say every week or 2 weeks, maybe, just to get that first connection. But once you've connected with someone, things aren't going to change wildly from week to week. So maybe it's every 30 days, every 60 days. 60 days is pretty safe. I don't think anyone's annoyed if you tap them every 60 days.
Okay. What about
you want to give it some space?
Great. And what if they actually apply for a job? Like how often?
So if you're following, I always say a week, like every week you check in.
Okay. Cool.
That's pretty safe.
Until you're told no.
Something definitive, at least.
A lot of people are worried that they're, bothering people. And I'm just like, you just got to shoot your shot.
Just nudge.
You do, because we all have attention issues. And so even if you are bothering me, I'm distracted with something else. So just tap. Just tapping.
I always say a lot of people are probably checking stuff on their phones, right? So like you could be in commute in transit or somewhere else or like with your kid or whatever, and then you totally forget. So do that. Think about how you are.
And I think, so I don't have an Apple phone, but I think that like if you look at it on your phone, then it's marked red, right? And then if you didn't action on it, it's just
on your watch.
Yeah, it's just red, and then you never circle back because it's not marked on red.
Yeah. I think a lot of people feel like, oh, I'm bothering somebody, but to me, it's like a service. Do me a service, like help me remember you, and please stay on my radar. And then if it's too much, I'll be like, oh, like maybe you could check in every couple months or whatever it might be. Yeah.
That's a good point. I think we're at time, but I don't know if you want to do one more question or if there's anything burning.
Yeah, so let me do the last one I see is about highlighting measurable results in a resume. And so for me, those are numbers. And I want to do my soapbox of numbers are that numbers look a lot of different ways. It doesn't have to be a dollar amount or an increase in a percentage. It can also be size of team, how many people. It can be how long it took. It can be size of the region, like what area you covered. So if you worked on rolling out a new process at your company, that's one thing, but you could say you rolled out a process that would affect 300 people. You did it in 6 weeks. You worked on a team of 5 people to get this done. And it covered the eastern region of the country. Like that's a much richer statement, and that shows impact, and that's measurable. So just think about numbers as timeframes, people, region, and not just money and percentages.
And what if you don't know those numbers? Like how do you said, talk to your PMs?
Well, talk to your teams, because somebody knows those numbers, right? Because otherwise you wouldn't have a job if you weren't making any impact. Like someone will have those answers. So I would say just try to track them down.
Or it could be the numbers around like the growth of the company. Like maybe you were employing,
and those are easy,
designer, and then the team grew to 20 people. So you saw that hyper growth. Like that could be something too.
And then adding to that sentence, like the team grew to 20 people in 90 days or in 6 months or over a year.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, Arielle, it's been so incredible having you with us. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been so great.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Oh,
did we miss any questions?
I think you muted. You're muted. Oh, well, I just got a little hoarse at the end, a little emotional. Look, we're ending.
Well, I would love to come back in the future. So definitely I will be back.
We would love to have you back.
Thank you.
We'd love to have you back. And thank you everybody for joining us. And thank you for your awesome questions. This will be posted once Jared has his little gnomes put it up on YouTube, I guess, but it'll be on LinkedIn. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks. So we'll see you at the next Duff. All right.
Awesome.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye.